Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I like to do all of that depending on our audience and where you are chiming in or tuning in from. Welcome to BlessedGirl TV. My name is Dr. Anana, and I am the founder of Blessed Girls Global, where we educate, empower, and inspire girls and women to be bold, to be you, and to be Blessed Girl. Blessed Girl offers a wide variety of services in areas of youth civility, uh, leadership, speaking, and life skill training, as well as our amazing program that's going out now is our Pads and Panties project. And this is to aid in ending period poverty around the globe. And our youth civility platform is the 4 C's. You got it? The 4 C's. You want to hear about them? The 4 C's is civility, community, creativity, and climate change. And these platforms, they allow young people to take the lead and share their ideas, concepts, and solutions in either of the 4 C's. So, each month here on Blessed Girl TV, as you come in, as you join the presentation, please give us your name, what city, state, country that you're chiming in from. This is our virtual audience, if you will. So we want to know who's here. We want to welcome you. We want to share your comments, your feedback, your ideas as we go through our broadcast today. But each month here at Blessed Girls, we like to bring resources, topics. Hopefully, you're following us on YouTube with Blessed Girl TV. On Instagram, on IG, we're Blessed Girls NJ, and of course on Facebook, we are Blessed Girls nonprofit, right? So we offer a lot of resources, training, and programs that we hope will uplift our youth, their families, and even those that serve young people as we do. So we're grateful that you're here. Again, say hello. Let us know where you're chiming in from. Last month, our session was in the area of self civility and self care. Right, and self care is not selfish. That was our topic last month, and I'm grateful even as we are celebrating Women's History Month, and we have a special guest coming up before the end of the month that we want to feature and share some information with you. But this month we're focusing on mental health and how it affects our teens, right? And in my opinion, many of our young people are experiencing a mental health crisis. And just like our 4 C's, you know what? And we talk about even climate change. It's like the building is on fire and nobody is sounding the alarm. And I really feel like when we talk about teens and mental health, we are really in a critical state. And I feel like as a parent, as someone who truly loves young people, it is time for us to talk about it. It's time for us to talk about it and, more importantly, be about it and offer resources and solutions in that space, right? So others may be coming out in different one specific area. There's a lot of statistics, right, in the area of mental health. And some of the alarming statistics for me is that the CDC reports that 42% of teens in the United States are experiencing persistent sadness and hopelessness. 42%. And get this one, 24% of female students have a suicide plan. When I heard that, when I read that, I was so disturbed and so disheartened just to know that these are the numbers of young people today, right? And more importantly, our females that are feeling this. So, as the founder of Blessed Girls, this is a topic that we must address. This is something that we must be about. And I'm grateful today that we are here to provide information and resources for our young people and our parents. So, if you're watching, if you are someone that, hey, you may not even have children, you might be a parent, I implore you today to share this broadcast, to invite someone, because you never know who needs the information that will be shared tonight. You be the one, right? To we say like evangelize, right? To help get the word out there. And this is so easy. All you have to do is like and share the broadcast. Like and share the broadcast. If you're watching this in the replay, it's okay. Say replay, but you can hit that share button and make sure that this message gets out to someone who may be in dire need of it. Okay? Can you promise to do that for me? Gotta get some thumbs up on that. You see? Okay, good, good. So again, today's session is to provide information and resources for young people and their parents and those that serve them, right? And you see, I'm a mother of three sons. I always have to tell you that because I'm a proud mother. Y'all know that, right? And my youngest is 17 years old. And so, after having a one on one discussion with him, he actually opened up to me and told me that he feels anxious all the time. All the time, guys. He told me this. He's like, Ma, I feel anxious all the time. And that like hit me because it was in my house. You know what I mean? Like I have a team that actually feels anxious all the time. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have that discussion with him, right? So I want to definitely hopefully encourage you all parents, you grandparents, to open up the dialogue and the conversation in regards to mental health and things that are concerning our children. And I had no idea. I had no idea. So I'm grateful for tonight's topic. Thank you for everybody that's coming on and commenting. Let me make sure I get that information. And one thing, just in the area, I'm trying to make sure I get my slides up, get everything I need here. When we talk about mental health tonight is a great opportunity, and we have some young people. With Blessed Girls, we always let our young people lead the way. So I want you to stay tuned because we have some of our young folks that are on the line that'll be leading this discussion and helping facilitate the topic. So you're here, you're sharing. Let me see who's here. Let me see who's here. All right, welcome. I see Mary is here. I know she hails from Guyana. All right, Adriana is here. I just happen to know some of these folks, but thank you, thank you. Hello, Tanisha. So thank you guys for chiming in and sharing again, because we know we are. I like to say it is a crisis. It is a crisis. Hello, Gabby. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. So hit that share button, and be a part of the discussion today and share. Share. If you have a friend, you have a family member, someone who might be parenting a teen right now, a teen that might be watching, please make sure you share the information. Thank you for watching. So without further ado, I just want to I wanted to just make sure, see who was in the room. Check with our audience, our virtual audience today, and see who was here. But I always think about even the four C's really came about during the pandemic. Right. And being able to hear from some of our young people during COVID that were experiencing the lockdown, were experiencing what were they were seeing in the space of the civil injustice that was going on around the world, not even just in the United States, right? And so looking at that, we really delved in, and we had a lot of sessions in 2020 and 2021 that were around mental health. And I'm grateful that our expert speaker today was a part of that. And she came on and gave us some sessions on mindfulness and tapping into our feelings and finding the resources and the tools that we needed. And so now here we are, post-COVID era, and mental health concerns still exist if they are not even worse. They may even be worse now today. So I'm grateful that we have this amazing expert that can come and share with us and give us some good information. So here, grab a pen, have a pad, a paper, be ready, take notes. And as always, Blessed Girl looks to utilize young people and allow them the opportunity to lead. I think I told you that. So we have some young people tonight, and I am going to grab my pen and paper, and I'm going to make sure that I am here and I am available, because I am going to listen and I am going to learn. And so tonight I'm going to turn over our next segment to Miss Ayana Slacum. Hello, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am fantastic. I'm fantastic. I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Yes.
So, I'm on here to introduce our speaker. So, Dr. Vanessa Vitiello is a licensed clinical psychologist practicing in New York and New Jersey. Dr. Vitiello attended Pace University in New York City, where she earned her bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degree. Okay, y'all heard? She got her bachelor's, her master's, and her doctorate. Do not play with her. Vanessa has specialized training in child and adolescent mental health, as well as with prenatal mood and anxiety disorders. Currently, Vanessa runs a thriving private practice, works as a high school psychologist, and is a full-time faculty in the psychology department at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Vanessa has worked with individuals across the lifespan and is passionate about destigmatizing mental health and ensuring all have access to care. Vanessa has been a Blessed Girls volunteer for a number of years and has focused her efforts on mental health education. Dr. Vitiello is excited to further discussions on mental health through the use of social media, blogs, and presentations like this evening. So, without further ado, let's bring Dr. Vitiello on the screen. And shout out to my mom. Hey, mom. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much.
Hello, hello. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Ayana, for your warm welcome. And I don't see Dr. Anon on here right now, trying to figure out this broadcast as we go, but I'm really happy to be here, really excited, and really passionate about sharing what I have to talk about tonight, which is teen mental health. So I'm going to try for just a quick moment to share my screen and hopefully be able to get up my presentation. So just let's see. All right. So can somebody give me a thumbs up if I am sharing, if we're seeing what I'd like you to see, if we're seeing a presentation?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can see it. Can you see it on the
Fabulous.
screen? Is that good? Can
Fabulous.
everybody see it?
I got to go from the beginning, so let me start over.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. I can't see all of you right now, so we're going to have a moment for a question and answer later on. So to start out, I am going to sort of just orient us to this topic and talk a little bit about teen mental health in general. So even if you're not a teen, you don't have a teen, we all were teens or will be a teen at some point. So this can be really relevant for anybody, but I'm going to talk generally about mental health as well. So hopefully everybody can learn something from this. I'm going to also do sort of a demonstration with some of our wonderful Blessed Girls here to talk a little bit about what are some of the things you can do right now if you're struggling with mental health issues. And then, of course, we're going to have time for question and answer and talk about some resources. So as Ayana mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. My training is with children and adolescents, but I've worked with folks across the lifespan as young as babies in the NICU, all the way to elders in variety of care settings. So when I'm talking about mental health, I'm really talking
You guys,
about such a unique time of life. And oftentimes it can feel like we're doing it all on our own. And parents of teens can feel really confused by dealing with them. So I'm really passionate about working with teens and helping families with teenagers. So today we're going to talk a little bit about teen mental health and sort of what's going on. As Dr. Anana mentioned, you may have heard, even if you just watch the news, if you go through Facebook or other forms of social media, seeing about sort of this teen mental health crisis. So before we talk about this, crisis that we're experiencing with teens' mental health, I want to sort of lay some groundwork for what is mental health in the first place. So mental health includes emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So mental health is comprised of all of these different things, right? Emotional, psychological, and social. So that might mean we're functioning emotionally all right, but we may have some social deficits, right? And if we think about teens, think about how all of these different things may impact them, how social things may come up for them, right? Being in school, being with their peers, how the pandemic affected all of that. So just keep these things in mind. I added in here a quote that I'm going to read to all of you because I think it's really important, again, to sort of lay the foundation and the groundwork for what is mental health. So, a psychologist named Lisa D'Amour says that many people have come to assume wrongly that psychological health, like physical health, means feeling good. Psychological health, however, is not about being free from emotional discomfort, but about having the right feeling at the right time and being able to bear the unpleasant ones. So I think this is incredibly important, especially for our young folks who are getting their mental health information now from a variety of sources, including oftentimes social media. I've seen a really big trend among teens of self diagnosing through TikTok or learning about mental health disorders through Instagram and different things like that. And on the one hand, I think it's wonderful that a lot of information is now much more accessible and that these things are being talked about much more widely than they probably ever have been. But on the other hand, I think that for many teens, this is leading them to believe that any signs of emotional discomfort or distress or unpleasant feelings is a lack of mental health. And that's not necessarily the case. Mental health is not an absence of feelings. Feelings are what make us so human. Feelings are important. And at times we do have unpleasant ones. But the idea of being mentally healthy or having this sort of psychological, emotional, social well being is that we're having the correct emotions in the right moments and that we're able to tolerate even the uncomfortable ones. And for many of us, or for some of us, especially teens, being able to tolerate the distress that comes from unpleasant emotions is something I think a lot of teens are struggling with right now. And so, one of the things we're going to also talk about tonight is how to cope with and how to deal with unpleasant emotions that might come up. So, when you're considering mental health, I always sort of like to present it as a spectrum. And the reason I do this, again, is because I think teens can often see things on social media or hear it in TV or on television shows or movies and say, all right, I'm feeling sad, so I must have depression. Or I'm feeling worried, so I must have anxiety. And there's actually quite a bit of range, as you see on this graphic, between having some distress, right, feeling worried, and having an actual mental health diagnosis, disorder, or illness. So when I lay it out in this way, I want to sort of explain it that all of us experience some degree of mental distress, right? If we think about it on this spectrum, on one end of the spectrum, we can experience no distress, a little distress, or some mental distress. All of us in our lives, if we're human and we're not robots, we've experienced some kind of mental distress. And like I said, that can look like feeling sad, that can be worry, that can be anger, can be happiness, right? It can be all of these different things, but mental distress can happen to all of us because we're human. And all of us got to go back now. Okay. The next on here is a mental health problem. So you can see this is a bit of a step above mental distress. And so some of us, many of us, may even experience mental health problems. Think about maybe a period in your life or for a period of time where you're feeling more down than usual or more worried than usual, right? This can happen to many of us. And then last, we have mental disorders or mental illness. This is what happens to some of us. This is when we're talking about individuals who are going to actually be diagnosed with some sort of mental illness or mental disorder. This is not everybody, right? So, not everybody who experiences the feeling of worry or a feeling of sadness is going to reach this level on the spectrum, but some of us will. And what we're seeing happen with teens is that more and more teens are getting to this top level of this spectrum, right? So whereas it used to be really truly some of us or a few of us meeting this criteria, we're seeing trends now that more and more of us are getting to that criteria. So what are we seeing happening with teens and kids, adolescents? We're seeing that more kids are being hospitalized for depression. If you look at this graphic here, you'll see that the blue is total mental health hospitalizations, and that the black is children who have been diagnosed with a depressive disorder. What I want to point out about this is that this is data taken from previously to the pandemic. So a lot of what we're talking about, or what we're seeing be talked about now, is the impact of the pandemic. The impact is surely there, right? The pandemic has certainly had an influence on everybody's mental health, not just teenagers, everybody's mental health. But specifically, when we're talking about children and adolescents, we have been seeing trends in increasing crisis or increasing depression, even previous to the pandemic. So that's a really important thing to consider, is that yes, the pandemic has been influencing teen mental health, and there are lots of other things that are influencing teen mental health. So I want to share a couple of more statistics. We see that the mental health crisis is worsening specifically amongst teen girls, right? We're seeing, this is from the CDC. The CDC puts out a trend report every year for teens. They talk about substance use, they talk about violence, they talk about mental health trends. And here we see a lot of red stop signs. What those red stop signs mean is that things are getting worse. So in 2021, we saw that feelings of sadness and hopelessness were getting worse. Teens experienced poorer mental health. More teens made a suicide plan, attempted suicide, or seriously considered suicide. So all of these things have gotten worse in the last few years. We see other statistics, as Dr. Anana said, 42% of teens experiencing sadness, 24% of females considering a suicide plan. Teens are facing real mental health struggles. 64% feel the world is more stressful now than when their parents were their age. 1 in 6 experience negative emotions all or often of the time. And 1 in 4 have been diagnosed with a mental health condition. So 1 in 4, right? We're talking about 1 in 4 teenagers has now met that top criteria that we were just talking about on that pyramid of the few of us or the some of us. Now that number has moved to 1 in 4. It didn't used to be that high. So what does this all mean? As I said, yes, the pandemic has made these things worse. It has influenced teen mental health. But there are other things that are influencing teen mental health that we have to consider as well. Some of those things include the increased use of technology and social media, increase in bullying and the ways that bullying happens. Even things such as our goal, and not feel hopeless with the news that they're seeing day after day on their televisions, on social media. Climate change and things of that matter. Teens are reporting that they don't know what to look forward to, or why even have a plan of going to college or having a career in the future if they don't know what the world is going to look like. And so all of these things sort of combine together, and then layer the big pandemic on top of that. Of course, our teens are going to be struggling. So what can we do about it? So I want to sort of boil this down in a simple, understandable way, because we have a lot of work that we need to do for our teens. And a lot of this is work that we need to do as mental health providers, as communities, as schools, as different sort of organizations. But what can we do right now? What I want to start by saying is knowing when to get professional help. And this is serious because, again, we're talking about statistics of rising rates of suicide and depression and serious mental health issues with teenagers. And some things can't be handled through just using a coping skill or talking with a trusted person. And sometimes it is extremely important to get somebody professional help. So I want to talk briefly about what are some of the signs that we might look for, whether it's with a friend, a child that of ours, a teen that we have in our home, a friend, a peer, a classmate. What are some of the things that we might think about when it's time to reach out for either professional help or get at least an adult involved who can help? So some of the things to really think about is if somebody's really quite withdrawn, right? More withdrawn than they normally are. So if they're typically sort of spending time with friends, and they've totally withdrawn from that, that's something to be aware of. People talking about, feelings of hopelessness, not thinking about the future for themselves anymore. Things like feeling as if you're a burden on somebody else when somebody is talking about how they feel guilty or that they're a burden on other people. All of these things together should raise sort of a red flag or an alarm in our mind of, this might be more serious. Maybe we should seek some extra help for this. And then when people are talking more seriously about hurting or killing themselves, about having a plan, coming up with a plan, writing letters about their end of life wishes, or writing letters or leaving some information behind, making plans for their own death, that's when it's time to seek immediate help. And I'm talking about this here because, again, we're talking about a teen mental health crisis. And as Dr. Anana said, this is serious stuff. And this is something where if you're sharing this and you're broadcasting this somewhere else, having these kinds of conversations can quite literally save somebody's life. So I don't say this to scare people or to upset people, or to give the impression that talking about suicide makes suicide more likely to happen. In fact, it's the opposite. When we talk about it, it actually makes it more possible for people to get help that they need. So when I talk about these things, I mean it in a very intentional way, and not just to sort of frighten people when these sort of topics come up. But I talk about it because this is something that is serious and that people can get help for. So these are some of the things that you want to keep in mind. Seeking professional help can look like emergency services. Like I said, when somebody is maybe talking about more seriously hurting them, right? Group settings, counseling in school, different options like that, that may not be for crisis moments, but might be for somebody who's experiencing more mental health problems. Other things we can do, though, for those of us who are maybe experiencing emotional difficulties, difficulty with emotional regulation, or just sort of coping with all of these different things that we're talking about, is to talk with trusted people and use coping skills. So I want to talk tonight a little bit about some of the coping skills I like to use with folks that I work with. And I chose these ones specifically because I think they are really accessible to people. And I think that they can be really helpful for people to learn kind of quickly because it's using things we already have, right? So our senses, our sight, our hearing, our sense of smell, taste, touch, and movement. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying coping with our senses, using our sense of smell to help us cope. So when I talk about finding coping skills, I think that using your senses is one quick way to find some coping skills that work. Because for many of us, We don't know what works for us, or we don't have a set of coping skills that we can pull out when we need them. And that's ultimately some of what I'd like to do with all of you here tonight who are watching, is help you build up a little bit more of a toolkit to help learn some different ways to cope. So, for example, you might want to be really sort of thoughtful about this. And you might want to think a little bit about what are the senses that really help to soothe me, and what are the senses that I don't think would help to soothe me. So, for example, I give this example to people I work with all of the time. For me, when I'm feeling stressed, noise can be really difficult for me. And when things are loud, or like I'm at a concert or at a busy intersection, that makes me feel kind of more stressed, more anxious than normal. So when I'm already having a difficult time and I'm looking for a coping strategy, I'm probably not going to watch TV or listen to music or go to a noisy place, because that's a sense that's not going to help me feel soothed. Instead, I know that for me, something that is on my sense of smell to use as a coping skill. So that might be something as simple as when I'm feeling really stressed out or having a difficult time, I might like keep something with me that smells nice and smell it as a relaxation opportunity and use it as a self-soothing skill. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what goes into the coping kit. What I want to share, I'm just looking to make sure we can do this. Share this tab instead. Okay, fabulous. Here we go. So what I have here is some more about self-soothing and coping. So like I said, using self-soothing and our senses can be a great way to find some coping skills. So do I have Ayana and Caitlin available?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
So I have my wonderful ladies here who have, oh, and I have Gabby too. I have them here so that they can sort of help walk through this process of what it might look like to start to build a coping mechanism, coping kit, so to speak, for them. And so I really encourage you at this point, we're going to sort of transition and talk a little bit about how to build a coping
Wait, is she there?
kit, or how to at least I think it keeps going in and out. Yes, this handout can be made available. I think the ladies can send both of these handouts, and I've got other resources available for folks too that I'm hoping can be sent out to everyone. So at this point, I think if you're here, you're following along, I would really encourage you to grab even your cell phone, if you have a favorite notebook, anything like that. Get out a pen and paper, get out some coloring pencils, whatever you want, and start building your coping kit. When I work with people and I have them build a coping toolbox, a coping kit, a coping plan, whatever name you want to call it for yourself, I have them create and write out what's going to go on it. And then I often have them take a picture of it on their phone and save it to their favorites, so that when they're having these difficult times, they can refer back to it easily. So this is one handout that, yes, I'm going to share, and I will make sure everybody gets it so that they can look at these options. But I would encourage you, like I was saying, to start thinking about what senses are sort of the ones that you might tune into. So I'm going to just go with Ayana first. When you think about this, Ayana, you think about, and I'm going to try to scroll through this a little bit. You think about vision, hearing, smell, taste. Does something come to mind for you about what works for you and what might not work for you?
I would say something that does work for me is definitely like vision. I know that sometimes if I'm anxious or something, I will go and like look at a sunset and I'll like feel calm, or like I know that I might want to color, or sometimes I might want to take a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes music helps, but not really too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Caitlin, I see you here too. Anything on this list standing out to you that you might want to add to your coping kit?
Probably with hearing, because I know for me, listening to music definitely helps me calm down and like help me deal with like the stress I have in my life, and also vision too. Like help like coloring actually helps me a lot too. I like recently realized that like recently, so like a couple weeks ago, I realized when I was like feeling stressed, I started coloring, and it gave me a sense of like peace.
Mhm.
That definitely helped me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Gabby, we haven't heard from you yet. So anything that you've heard that you feel like you are sort of wanting to know more about, or that you could imagine putting on your coping kit?
I think for me personally, it'd probably be touch. I know if I get upset or frustrated, I normally like to clean or like do one of my like do dishes or something, and also going along with hearing, listening to music, that calms me down a lot to clean.
Yeah. Yeah. So you just, to those of you who are watching in, you just heard from three different young women explaining the things that work for them. And that's such an incredible thing that they're able to verbalize and be able to tell all of us.
Mhm.
But that's not everybody's experience, right? Not everybody can say, "Yep, I know. For me, music works or taking a walk works," right? That takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of practice to get there. So we have, three ladies here who were able to share that with us and who are able to think about those things, and did a wonderful job, demonstrating some of the things that they'd like to add to their coping kit. But I want to just sort of also explain that these things take practice, and we want to practice doing these things even when we're feeling our best, because just like when we're practicing a sport or an instrument, um, we talk about practicing all of the time, not just when there's a competition or when there's a game, right? We practice all season long, not just the week before something coming up. So we have to think about this in that way too, right? We have to think about how can we practice these things, how can we find what works, so that we can get to the point where we can quickly sort of go to things, and find what works for us.
Miss
Now,
Vanessa, I have a question.
yes,
So
of
if
course.
I was somebody who wanted to use this worksheet, what exactly would I like do? Like, would I just check off the boxes that I feel resonate with me?
That's a great question. So I would start the way that I would approach this, and I think you can approach this in different ways. I think that could be one way to do it, right? Is sort of take a look at it, take a look at the whole thing, and
Mhm.
sort of check off things that stand out to you. Like maybe you take a look and you say, learn to play an instrument. Definitely not going to work for me. I have no musical inclination, so I can just cross that one off. Maybe that approach won't work for you. So I think another way of doing it is by starting with the five senses and thinking about what ones are sort of already, soothing to you, what ones are already not so helpful for you. So, like I was saying, for me, I would probably, at least to start, cross off everything to do with hearing. This is for myself, right? If I were approaching it this way, I'd cross off everything to do with hearing, and I would go and I'd look at the ones under smell. And I would probably throughout the week try all of these different ones and maybe check off or even make notes next to the ones that I felt were most helpful or most soothing to me. And then when I found at least maybe two or three that I felt were really helpful to me, I would sort of circle them or transfer them to my, big coping kit that I have, right? This like plan that I'm coming up with, this notebook that I'm writing down my coping plan. So that's the way that I would maybe think about approaching a worksheet like this.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So I have some other resources, but I also want to continue on. The resources will definitely be shared, but I want to keep talking just a little bit more about coping kits, and just talk in the sense of what is my self-care plan. So I heard Dr. Anana talking about this a little while ago, that there was a broadcast on self-care. What does it really mean to do self-care? What does that actually look like? And so part of building this coping kit, all of these things are things I want you to be considering, right? And again, this doesn't happen necessarily overnight or in one broadcast that we do. This is a practice that we have to be intentional about, and we can all sort of get involved. So if you're a family and you've got teens, do this as a family activity. Every night at dinner, talk about what's your self-care plan? What did you do today that was on the self-soothing checklist, right? What are we going to try this weekend, maybe as a family? Maybe before we all go to bed at night, we're going to turn in our cell phones to a particular area of the house, and we're all going to do a 3-minute meditation, right? So there's different ways to start thinking about, how am I going to incorporate this coping kit, what is my self-care plan? I also want people to add, who can I reach out to into their coping kit, into their coping plan? I want you to come up with at least 3 people that when you're feeling, whether you want to call it a crisis, whether you want to call it anxiety attack, whether you want to just call it having a bad day, who are the 3 people that you can call, text, FaceTime with, right? That when you speak with them, you're going to feel a little bit better. When you talk with them, you're going to feel safe, right? I want those people's names and phone numbers in this kit, in this plan that you're building. Write it down, take a picture of it, make it creative however you want. And then start thinking about, what other skills can I add to my toolkit? So one other resource that I'm going to be sharing with you is from the American Psychiatric Association. And this resource here talks about different ways to incorporate coping skills. I'm going through it briefly, but you're all going to have access to this, right? On how to build some new coping skills. So let your emotions out. How can you let your emotions out? How can you practice self-love? How can you take a moment, ask for help, all of these different things. And in here is a really cool breakdown of a family calendar to improve mental health. So it has a whole layout in here that you can adapt for yourself and for your family, and get everybody involved, right? In, meditating for 5 minutes together, connecting with someone, planning an activity of gratitude. And again, being really intentional about how you're going to incorporate these different coping skills into your coping toolkit. So at this point, I want to, again, be conscious of time, and I want to pause here to make sure that we have a little bit of time for any questions that maybe have come up along the way.
So I had a question. I would say that, what is, like, it takes time to develop mental health, of course. But what would you say is like the biggest challenge to overcome when trying to develop your own mental health or self-care plan in your coping kit?
That's a great question. What is sort of a barrier to actually using these things and doing them? I would say, in my experience working with folks, the biggest barrier is not practicing. So if you remember, I was just talking about practice these things even when you're in the best mood. And the reason that is if you think about it, right? When you're feeling really stressed out, when you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not going to be in the right headspace to try out all these different things. So oftentimes people think, oh, I'm feeling pretty good. Things are going okay. And then boom, something happens, right? Like a pandemic or a breakup or a fight in a friendship, right? And now you're feeling really overwhelmed. You're feeling stressed. Where are my coping tools? Where are my skills, right? And it goes totally out of our mind because that's how our brains work, right? We get sent into that fight or flight mode in those moments. And it can be really hard for us to access those other parts of our brain that help to regulate us. So that's what I think can be a big barrier, is not practicing and just sort of incorporating these things into our daily lives and into sort of a practice for ourselves, and only relying on these things in those sort of heat of the moment, fight or flight moments.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we like quickly like how do we identify like if our mental health is like, getting to a point where before it's too late? Like how we quickly like say like oh our mental health
Mm-hmm.
it needs to like I need to work on my mental health. Cuz
That's
like
it.
I know for me it took me a while to actually figure that out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, again, wonderful question. And I think one that probably many folks are questioning right now. How do I sort of know the difference between, just my everyday, sort of worries about something and really persistent like anxiety or depression that I might be having? And I think the way that we can sort of think about this is how much distress something is causing you and how much it's impacting your functioning. So, as a mental health provider, those are the things that we look for in people when we're meeting with them and trying to assess how well or not they're doing, how mentally healthy or not they are, right? We think about how intense is the distress that they're feeling, how long have they been feeling this way, and how much is it impacting their functioning. And so I think if you're somebody who's sort of reflecting about how you're doing and how maybe you've been feeling, and you're noticing, I'm feeling a bit more sad than normal, right? Or this sadness is lasting longer than I'm used to. Or this sadness is making it hard for me to go to school, wake up in the morning, hang out with my friends. That's probably some indications that it might be time to seek some extra help, or that you may be struggling with your mental health more than just sort of having a down day or feeling a little bit blue, right? Those are some indications that we would want to think about. And this is a question I think that parents often ask, right? How do I know when something is going on with my child, right? Teens, maybe we're not often going to our parents as a first line of defense and saying to them, hey, I think I might be struggling with depression. Do you think you could help me with this? Sometimes we try to figure it out on our own or talk to our peers about it, right? And so for parents, I think they're often wondering, how do I know what's going on with my teen? And so, like those things I was talking about before, right? How intense the emotions are, how much it's impacting their functioning, right? So, if your child is coming to you and telling you, I can't go to school, I can't go take my test today, I'm not going to hang out with my friends, or hasn't been hanging out with their friends, or just generally sort of has lost interest in things that they're typically interested in, right? Those are some ideas, or some signs that maybe they're struggling more than we want them to be.
Okay, I have another question. What So you brought up the thing of parents, because as teenagers and kids, we typically don't feel comfortable going to our parents because they always being biased, they always want to do so much. So how can you get the parents to be able to like make it more easier for us to be able to come to them with no hesitation and not worrying about like that extra stuff that goes on in the background?
So I think you cut out for a second, so I just want to make sure I heard what you were saying. But basically, how teens can maybe feel like they can approach their parents, and maybe some things parents can do to make that more possible for their teens.
Yes.
So this, again, just such a wonderful thing. This always comes up with my work with parents and teens. I think oftentimes parents and caregivers come from a place of love and come from the experiences they've had, right? And so think about it this way, right? If you're a teenager, try to put yourself in a caregiver's shoes, in your parents' shoes for just a moment, right? When you love somebody and you care about somebody, you don't want to see them struggling. You don't want to see them in pain. So for many of us, our automatic response is to go into problem-solving mode. And sometimes that can be exactly what our teens don't want to hear. They don't want a laundry list of, have you tried this? Have you thought about this? If you just did this differently, you'd feel better. And so what I can say for parents is, before you go down the route of problem solving, is to start with validation. So validation is sort of like the basis of therapeutic work, I'll say, right? Validation is so important for a teenager and for anybody to just feel like they're being seen and they're being heard. Validation is one sort of simple thing that anybody can do, but I think especially parents can do, is to just sort of open up space for their teens, right? So even if what our teen is saying to us makes no sense to us at all, or we feel like it's blown totally out of proportion, we want to start from a place of validation. So if our teen is coming to us and saying like, it's the end of the world because nobody will sit with me at lunch anymore because I wore the wrong outfit on the wrong day, I can't possibly go back to school, right? A parent may react like, what are you talking about? Like, come, just choose a different outfit for tomorrow. It'll be fine. Like, what are you talking about? Wrong. Start from a place of validation. Simple statements, just being with them and saying, that sounds so hard, right? That really stinks that nobody sat with you at lunch today. And leave it there, right? So validation just creates a space for us to feel like we can share, right? And so if you can get that going in your family and can sort of get that space created, I think you can go from there and build on that to go further and sort of have a conversation with caregivers, parents, and talk about what do you need right now? Do you need somebody who's listening and giving validation, or do you need a problem-solving parent right now? And you can get to that place where you can maybe have that more open dialogue with your parents and say, actually, right now, I do need the problem-solving parent. I'm feeling really stuck. Can you help me with this? Or you might be able to say to them, I just need.
So we have a question in the chat. They ask, what would you recommend for someone who's struggling discussing their boundaries with their family?
Yeah. So boundaries are a huge part. And I will talk with Dr. Anana. Maybe we can set up a whole entire broadcast on boundaries, because boundaries is a huge thing. So what I can say about boundaries and families is that I think it's first important for us to be clear about what our boundaries are. And I want to also sort of frame this in, everybody is allowed to have a boundary. So teenagers are allowed to have boundaries. Children are allowed to have boundaries, and parents are allowed to have boundaries. And so making sure that those boundaries are clear and stated to the people who are in the family are really important. And I think sometimes it's important to first demonstrate or model that. So as a parent, we want to have firm and reasonable boundaries. And so we want to model that for our children, that that's okay. So that when it's time for our children or our teens to create their own boundaries, they already know that that's something that's allowed and that they have permission to do. I think what can be difficult with boundaries is when they're not respected, right? And so I think we all have to have in mind what are the boundaries that we have that are totally firm cement wall boundaries, and what are the boundaries that we're allowed to sort of have a little flexibility with, right? And so there might be people in our lives who treat us in ways that we don't like and that are not healthy for us. And so it might mean setting a boundary that you may have to say to someone, if you can't treat me with respect, then I'm not going to be able to spend time with you, right? And a boundary might sound like that, right? Or a boundary may also sound like, tonight I have to work, but I can hang out with you next week, right? And so I think it's boundaries are really first about being clear with yourself about what are absolutes, where is there flexibility, and how am I communicating these things with people in my life?
I have a question.
Sure.
So like, what if you internalize your emotions and you're not good at like journaling or like expressing? Like, what do you do?
Mm-hmm. So I think that can be really can be an experience for a lot of people.
You're cutting out.
In fact, when we talk about, I think I lost everybody for a second, but I'm back. So what I was saying, that I think, some of the ways we think about like having emotions is that people can sort of be internalizers and sort of hold things in, or they can be externalizers. So for example, somebody who's an internalizer may kind of be a little bit more to themselves, withdrawn, feel sort of sadness within them, whereas somebody who might have similar feelings might express it outwardly by being sort of angry or hostile towards other people, right? So it could look a little bit different depending on who the person is. So I would say that for somebody who is more of an internalizer, they may have experiences where they're doing a lot of sort of thinking in their own mind, right? They can get caught sort of in their own thoughts about things. And so for people who are experiencing those sorts of internal processes, I would start from that place of doing more internal coping, right? So if you're not going to do the sort of walk outside or look at the sunset or write in a journal or call a friend, what can you do with yourself? And one of the things we can do with ourselves is something called positive self-talk, right? We can also do things called cognitive restructuring or thought stopping or changing. And so when we're having these sort of internal thoughts about ourselves, like, I'm terrible, I'm the worst person in the world, we have to sort of train ourselves. And again, this is a practice to stop those thoughts and think, what kind of distortion am I having right now? What kind of thought restructuring do I need to do? Right? So if I'm thinking like, I'm worried about what's going to happen at school today, and I'm going to fail my test, and then it's going to ruin my life, that might be sort of catastrophizing, right? And so we may be catastrophizing a situation. And so when we identify how the internal process for ourselves is maybe not so accurate, we can create a little bit more room to change those thoughts around, right? So instead of saying, I'm going to fail my test and ruin my life, we can say something like, I may not do as well as I like, and I'll still be okay, right? So we can do, that's one thing. And the other thing is positive self-talk. And I think positive self-talk is, again, a practice. It's something that doesn't come naturally to a lot of us. A lot of us, the way our brains work is to find the negative. And so a lot of us are much more quick to say everything that we've done wrong or that we're doing wrong. And so we have to be active and intentional about talking positively and kindly to ourselves. So if you're somebody who's sort of caught up in your own mind and is a bit of an internalizer, coming up with some affirmations or mantras can be really helpful, right? And even if you need to write reminders for yourself to do this, like writing on a Post-it note and sticking on your bathroom mirror, and as you brush your teeth every night before bed, you're going to cite that mantra to yourself or that positive self-talk to yourself. That's something that I would recommend doing. So I know we're getting ready to get close to time. So what I'm hoping I can just share one more thing, which is some additional resources that I just want. So these are just some things that will be sent out, as well as some additional resources for those of us who may want to do some, extra look into some of the things we talked about. So I've got in here some of the coping skills we talked about. 7 Cups, which I was introduced to, which is a teen mental health online organization, sort of community platform for teens to communicate about mental health things together. I've included some mental health apps that I think are particularly useful and have learned a little bit more about. There's some online mental health options. And then I wanted to just talk briefly about finding a therapist because I think one of the issues that can come up for a lot of people is sort of not knowing where to start when it comes to therapy, right? Or how to find a therapist or how to get access to it. So in this resource guide, I included 3 different places where you can look for a therapist. And what you can do is filter by your location, your zip code. You can filter by the insurance you have. You can filter by the kind of specialty that they work with, the age group that they work with, the gender that the clinician is, all of these different things to really get specific about finding somebody who's a good fit. One of the things that I'm really sort of passionate about is access to mental health. It's something we've got to work on, but also about finding a therapist who is a good fit for someone. And I always encourage people to try to approach at least the initial phases of it sort of like an interview, right? Seeing if it's going to be a good fit, trying on a few different people and seeing how it works, and taking your time with something like that because it's an important thing. So these resources, again, will be sent out if you're interested in learning more about them. And then I did just want to wrap up and say thank you to everybody. And I'm leaving here my direct email and also my social media. My Instagram, I heard tonight. You can also find some other things, but that's a good way to sort of get in contact or stay in touch as well. So I thank you all so much. If there's more questions, again, feel free to reach out and I would be happy to be in touch.
Thank you so much for joining us and dropping all these gems. We greatly do appreciate it. You're so amazing. Make sure you guys stay connected with us as Blessed Girls and reach out to Dr. Vitiello if you have any questions or concerns. And yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Anani, you're muted.
All right, all right. Oh my goodness. Listen, guys, please. Again, thank you. Very informative. Make sure you give some hearts. Go ahead and blow up her page. Get to her Instagram, email her for more questions. But again, we are so grateful. Thank you. Shout out to all the Blessed Girls that are on tonight for being a part of our studio audience and doing the heavy lifting, if you will, because being here and sharing and opening up and asking the questions is really a blessing for all of us. So thank you all. But get to her Instagram, email her, make sure you guys stay connected. And if you're not a part of Blessed Girls, you can go to our website. It's right there. You could join, become a Blessed Girl, I believe is the heading, so we can stay connected and continue the conversation. So thank you so much, Dr. Vitiello, Ayana, Caitlin, Gabby. So great to have you all here tonight. I appreciate you. And I want you guys to listen. That's right. Spread the word. Make sure you hit that share button. As we said, you never know in today's time and climate at any point where someone really needs this information. They need the resources. So I always say, you know what? You be the one, you be the resource, and you help as we move forward. So I thank you guys for being here. Again, if you watch us in our replay, type in replay, tell us where you're watching from. We are a local organization here in New Jersey in the United States, and we are a local nonprofit with a global reach. So we are grateful for the opportunity. So let's get connected. We have a plan to have an actual in-person summit. So you see, we're just really getting started, but we certainly want to be that resource, and we want to make a difference and help save lives, because we're doing that. So if you want to partner with us, make sure you can go to Blessed Girl. You can make a donation. We continue our Pads and Panties project, but we're looking to do a in-person mental health summit. So if you're watching, you're a parent, you are a business owner, if you have a location, we're looking for a facility and a venue, because they say you have not because you ask not. So I'm just going to let you know, we are planning and setting dates. We'll have Dr. Vitiello. If you are another mental health professional expert and you have access to someone, you have access to sponsorship, let's make this even bigger and even better as we move forward and offer these resources and help to support our young ladies and teens, young people around the world. So I thank you for tuning in. Thank you for contributing. Again, my name is Dr. Nana with Blessed Girls, and y'all know, be bold, be you, and you continue to be blessed. Thank you so much. Have a great night.